In 1964, our American television sets were introduced to Gilligan's Island. This lighthearted sitcom had a huge impact on the people that viewed it. The show began in black and white and transitioned into color in its second season. The charm and appeal of this show was just everlasting. It was almost like watching a living cartoon. Every one of the characters on the show has become a household name, whether it's Gilligan, the skipper, Mary Ann, or Ginger, or even the professor. And don't forget the Howls. The series follows the comedic adventures of these 7 castaways as they try to survive on an island where they're shipwrecked. Most of the episodes revolve around the dissimilar castaways and their conflicts, and also their unsuccessful escape attempts that were almost always ruined by Gilligan in some form or fashion. The pilot episode differed greatly from the final product that was released. Most notably, it was the characters, which included 2 secretaries and a high school teacher. That pilot was called Marooned, and it was so different that it was not aired at the time. It was eventually aired on television in 1992. Natalie Schafer, who played Mrs. Howell, said she did Marooned, the pilot, in 1962, strictly for a free trip to Hawaii. Afterwards, she was in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, on a vacation when she got a telegram from the U.S. She read it and burst into tears, and everybody that she was with in Puerto Vallarta just assumed that it was a telegram telling her that her mother was doing poorly. She had been ill at the time, and maybe it was a notice saying that she had died. And they started offering their condolences without knowing the true nature of the telegram. But she ended up telling them that her mother hadn't died. The reason that she was crying was because the pilot for Gilligan's Island sold, and she had to stay in Los Angeles now and couldn't move back to New York City. You might be interested to know that Jerry Van Dyke turned down the role to play Gilligan. He just didn't want to be in an ensemble cast. Really, what he wanted was to be in a show and to replicate the success that his brother Dick had. That opportunity came to him later when he grabbed the lead in a real short-lived sitcom called My Mother the Car. One would think that he went on to regret that decision, but all of us look at it now thinking that Bob Denver is the one and only Gilligan. The pilot for the show was filmed in November of 1963. On the final day of production in Hawaii, the cast and crew learned of John F. Kennedy's assassination. There's a really small thing that you may have missed in the sequences they filmed there that kind of cemented this historical event into the series. In the opening credits for the first season, as the minnow pulls out of the harbor, the United States flag can be seen flying at half-mast. Now, the boat that leads them to get stranded on the island, the SS Minnow, was jokingly named after the head of the FCC. Newton Minnow, spelled only with one N, was the chairman of the FCC who had his run-ins with television. He described television as a vast wasteland, and this is the way that the industry decided to poke fun at him with an inside joke. The castaways are constantly turning on a portable radio they have to catch news and keep updated on how things are going in the real world. The announcer that you hear is the voice of a veteran character actor named Charles Maxwell. He appeared on Bonanza, Gunsmoke, Lawman, Rawhide, and The Rifleman. Though he was never credited, Gilligan's Island was his longest recurring role. Of all 7 castaways, the skipper is known for breaking the fourth wall of filming a TV show or a movie by looking directly into the camera and making a face. He did it quite a few times. However, Ginger occasionally would do the same thing. This is particularly noticeable when she tries to kiss Gilligan and he resists. She often would look at the camera and shrug. Tina Louise's contract stipulated that she be the last in the credits. This is why in the first season you hear the announcer sing "The Movie Star," and that's followed up with "And the Rest" here on Gilligan's Island, as opposed to the Professor and Mary Ann. Bob Denver complained about this to Sherwood Schwartz, that it was completely ridiculous to leave those names out, and that all the cast members should be listed in the opening credits. Schwartz and company said that his hands were tied because of Louise's contract. Bob Denver got so mad that he threatened to boycott the production, and some say he actually did. And then he really got serious and said that he wouldn't film the second season unless the Professor and Mary Ann were listed after Tina Louise. Somehow Schwartz was able to get around the contract that Louise had in place, and the music was changed on that intro for the second season, and the rest is television history. Now, during that time frame on television, it was a real widespread belief that American television wouldn't show any women's navels. They felt like this part of the female anatomy was off limits for TV. But Mary Ann's navel is particularly common and is shown in a lot of episodes. And even Ginger occasionally, hers is obvious too, along with some of the guest stars and extras. It's said that the producers discovered a loophole somehow in the censorship rules that allowed them to do this. The whole premise of these characters being stuck on an island created a kind of unique opportunity in that various devices had to be constructed from only the materials that would be found on a tropical island. Thus, the props had to be specifically made by the prop department, and they loved this challenge, which just happened to be a change of pace from them normally putting together standard props that they had in storage. The bamboo foot pedal powered car used in several of the third season episodes was a particular favorite, with the cast just lining up to try it out. Now, for those that love the pop music of the 60s, the episode entitled "Don't Bug the Mosquitoes" during the second season was a real favorite. It's a loving spoof on the British invasion and the girl group phenomenon that were sweeping the charts at the time. This rock band that lands on the Castaways Island is called the Mosquitoes, which is an obvious riff on the Beatles. And then it goes on to do it even further by the group's members being named Bongo, Bango, Bingo, and Irving. And you notice the comical twist on Ringo. In response to this band landing on the island, the women that we know there formed their own band that's styled after the Supremes, the Shangri-Las, and the Ronettes. The Honeybees group that was comprised of Mary Ann, Ginger, and Mrs. Howell end up singing their song, "You Need Us," and it's an unforgettable act in this episode. Now, one problem they had in shooting and filming this episode is that Dawn Wells, who played Mary Ann, was completely tone deaf. She couldn't sing at all. Her singing would make everybody else go off key. It was that bad. So they bring in somebody else to overdub her vocals, and that person was Jackie DeShannon. Her early singles like "Lonely Girl" struggled to crack the charts, but she finally got her big break in 1964 when she opened for the Beatles tour. That's one thing that will get you front and center. Shortly before she did this overdubbing for Mary Ann, she would score a massive hit with "What the World Needs Now Is Love." Her Beatles connection ended up taking her to the UK, where she recorded some records, including "Don't Turn Your Back on Me." During the recording of that song, there was a young session guitarist that was playing at the studio, and that happened to be Jimmy Page. Yeah, that's Jimmy Page, who later went on to form the group Led Zeppelin. Their musical involvement that day in the studio led to a romantic relationship, and it goes even farther than that. In Led Zeppelin 3, on the cut Tangerine, That is said to be inspired by the breakup of DeShannon and Page, who actually split up around the time that Don't Bug the Mosquitoes episode aired. Alan Hale Jr., who played the skipper, had a tendency to address people as Little Buddy. Prior to this series, he had guest starred on The Andy Griffith Show in the episode The Farmer Takes a Wife. And during this episode, he refers to Barney Fife as Little Buddy on several occasions. This trait was really written into the Gilligan's Island series, and Little Buddy became the skipper's signature term for affection for Gilligan. Sherwood Schwartz pitched the idea for this show to CBS executives multiple times, and they kept turning him down because they thought it would be a terrible failure. Finally, his persistence paid off, and they greenlit the project. Thank you so much, Sherwood, for your persistence, because everybody that watched this series grew to love it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.